Welcome to this deep dive. We've pulled together a stack of sources for you today, mainly drawing from The Economist's June 14, 2025 edition.
Yeah.
Think of this as your essential guide, sort of to navigate some of the most interesting and, well, impactful currents shaping the world right now.
That's right. Our goal isn't just, summarizing headlines. We're really going to dig into these articles, pull out the core insights, the surprising facts, and those moments that really give you a sharper understanding of what's actually happening across global business, politics, tech,
Culture, too.
and even culture and society. Exactly.
Exactly. So we're going to unpack this whole collection, everything from global economic forecasts and geopolitical flashpoints
Right.
to some really cutting-edge tech that's starting to feel, well, less like sci-fi and more like reality, and also shifts in how we live, how we interact.
Okay.
Let's jump in. Okay, so let's start by navigating some of these global money flows and the key business stories.
Yeah.
The sources seem to paint a picture of an economy, well, in transition.
They really do, yeah. We're seeing the latest global growth forecasts, from places like the World Bank, the IMF, and they're pointing to areas where maybe a swift course correction might be needed. It feels like cautious optimism mixed with some pretty significant regional challenges.
And a huge part of that whole picture is trade, isn't it? The state of U.S.-China trade relations.
Yeah.
That remains a massive factor. We've seen existing tariffs on, well, a whole range of goods for a while now.
Yeah, we have. But what's particularly notable in these sources is the focus on potential new tariffs, things being considered right now.
Right.
Specifically, they really delve into the discussions around Mr. Trump considering tariffs on imported cars.
Okay.
And this isn't just some theoretical idea floating around. They actually mention examples of manufacturers who'd be affected. Think BMW, Toyota, Hyundai, Kia, Mercedes, even GM, with its foreign production.
Wow.
The potential ripple effects there across the whole auto industry and global supply chains, they're pretty significant.
That makes sense. Now, shifting to specific national economies, the UK gets a mention. Noting current inflation levels, still a bit tricky. But the striking point seems to be the government's infrastructure spending plans. They're talking figures like 11.8 billion, maybe 14.5 billion. That kind of public spending, well, it can have a big impact.
It certainly can. What's particularly fascinating, though, in the sources is the deep dive into Ireland's economy.
Oh, yeah.
They use this concept. They actually call it leprechaun economics.
Leprechaun economics. Okay.
The insight here is that while Ireland reports these, extraordinarily high GDP growth numbers, often driven by huge multinational corporations routing profits through the country, for tax purposes, this can give a somewhat, distorted view of the actual domestic economic activity happening on the ground.
I see. So the headline number doesn't quite match reality.
Exactly. It really highlights how globalized finance can complicate those traditional economic metrics we rely on.
That's a great example of digging beneath the surface. Speaking of trends, fast fashion is another major business phenomenon. They highlight companies like Shein, Temu.
Absolutely. The sources discuss the incredible appeal, obviously the ultra-low cost of the super rapid trend cycles.
Yeah, exactly.
But the crucial insight they really unpack is the significant and often hidden costs that come with it.
Like what?
Well, we're talking documented environmental concerns, serious labor practice issues that raise red flags, and even questions around product safety standards compared to, traditional retail.
Right.
It reveals this real tension, doesn't it, between consumer demand for cheap stuff and the broader impact of how it's made.
And on the consumer side itself, the sources seem to reinforce a shift we've seen speeding up post-pandemic. People moving away from spending quite so much on physical goods and really prioritizing services and experiences instead, like travel, things like that.
That changes the game for a lot of industries. It fundamentally alters demand patterns if you're a retailer, understanding that shift.
Yeah, it's absolutely key.
Okay, let's transition now. Something else shaping the global landscape. Political fault lines and power plays.
Right. This section in the sources, this is where things get particularly intense, I think. Looking at tensions both within countries and between them.
Starting in the U.S., there's an analysis of President Trump's use of the National Guard. The sources mention specific instances like deployments for crime or migrant-related issues. Los Angeles is mentioned. But the core debate they seem to explore centers on his authority to actually deploy them domestically like that.
Yes, exactly. They reference the Insurrection Act.
Ah.
And the discussion isn't just about where they were deployed, but the deeper legal questions around the president's power to invoke that act, potentially bypassing state authority in certain circumstances. It's a real deep dive into a specific point of executive power. Interesting. And the sources also introduce a term you might be hearing more: the woke right. They try to define this phenomenon, explore the different factions and motivations within this sort of anti-woke coalition. It's about understanding how this particular cultural and political alignment is, well, forming.
And moving outside the U.S., there's a very concerning trend highlighted: the rise of political violence in Latin America.
Yeah, that sounded serious.
It really is. The sources point to specific examples that just underscore the severity, like the violence surrounding President Petro's total peace strategy in Colombia.
Right.
And tragically, the assassination of a presidential candidate in Ecuador. It suggests, well, deepening instability in parts of the region.
That's worrying. We also get updates on major geopolitical conflicts. The Russia-Ukraine war obviously remains a critical focus, discussions of Russia's current offensive efforts. But the military insight that really jumps out from the sources is the absolutely central role that drones are now playing in the fighting.
Oh, completely. Drones are transforming the battlefield. It's undeniable.
Yeah.
And as the sources highlight, this widespread use isn't just impacting the conflict itself, it's fueling a significant boom in Europe's defense industry.
Really?
Yeah, they mention specific places like Bourges in France, home to companies like MBDA. They're seeing ramped up production to meet this demand.
Wow, okay. Another major area of geopolitical tension the sources examine is the Taiwan Strait.
Always a flashpoint.
Right. They lay out the ongoing strategic debate for the U.S. Should it stick with its long-standing policy of strategic ambiguity, being deliberately unclear about whether it would intervene?
Or shift to clarity.
Or shift to greater clarity, exactly. And this whole debate is happening against the backdrop of China's continued military buildup.
The sources really frame it as a crucial strategic choice, with incredibly high stakes for regional stability.
No kidding. There are other notable political threads in there, too, like insights into the outcome of Narendra Modi's recent election in India and what that signals for the country's direction.
And they also provide context on groups like Hamas, discussing their position, strategy shifts in Gaza, and shedding some light on their funding sources, too. It's all about understanding the complexities of the region.
So what does all this actually mean for the future and, our daily lives? Let's look at some of the cutting-edge technology discussed in these sources.
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting, I think. One area they dive into is China's ambitious push for what they're calling the low-altitude economy.
Low-altitude economy.
Okay.
Sounds futuristic.
It does. But the sources show it's actually moving into reality. They give specific examples.
Right, like EHang's certified flying cars. The sources mention actual details, like their potential speed, their altitude.
Yeah.
And even that, they have a pre-order price. It's not just concept art anymore.
Exactly. And then there's Meituan's drone delivery network, which is already operating at a, frankly, significant scale.
Meituan, the huge Chinese delivery platform.
That's the one. They're using drones extensively. The sources highlight some pretty impressive metrics, like their delivery volume. The average time being under 15 minutes, often faster than motorbikes.
Wow, under 15 minutes.
Yeah. And the operational details, like using visual recognition tech for precise drop-offs, it's a really concrete example of commercial drone integration at scale.
But tech advancement, it has its downsides too, right? The sources address the enormous and growing energy demands of AI data centers.
That's a critical point, absolutely. They cite how much power these centers consume. We're talking figures that are starting to significantly impact energy grids, global energy planning.
So it's a real issue.
It's a huge hidden environmental cost, really, of this AI revolution we're seeing.
And on the military tech front, beyond the drones we already talked about, the sources touch on newer tech being explored, like microwave weapons.
Yeah, these are being looked at specifically as a way to disable drones and electronics. It represents a new frontier in electronic warfare.
Okay, shifting fields entirely now. There's some fascinating progress in health science mentioned. The sources discuss the development of new non-invasive prenatal tests, NIPTs they call them, that use cell-free DNA.
This is a really promising area, actually, by analyzing tiny fragments of fetal DNA found floating in the mother's blood.
Okay.
These tests are being developed to predict risks like preeclampsia, even stillbirth, much earlier than traditional methods allowed.
And non-invasively.
Exactly. It's a non-invasive way to potentially identify really serious pregnancy complications much sooner. The sources also briefly touch on updated insights regarding dietary protein requirements for different groups, which is interesting too.
Okay, so let's try and connect some of this back to you, the listener. Let's look at some social and cultural shifts presented in these sources.
Right. We see trends affecting daily life, identity, like the growing global significance and market presence of modest fashion. That gets a mention.
And the sources also look at broader societal trends, don't they? Analyzing shifts in religious belief, secularization across both the U.S. and Europe.
Yeah, those long-term shifts. And for leisure, there's discussion around the expansion of the FIFA Club World Cup.
Ah, the football tournament.
Exactly. And its ambition, really, to genuinely compete with the Champions League for global viewership and, prestige.
Okay. And something interesting related to wealth and behavior. The sources note the growth in the luxury real estate market in Africa, emphasizing that increasingly local wealth is a major driver, not just foreign buyers.
Yeah, that connects back to that consumer shift we mentioned earlier, doesn't it? Where wealth is being directed towards experiences, high-value assets.
Right.
It shows how changing economic landscapes within countries are driving specific market trends.
And to wrap up this section with a truly surprising cultural nugget from the sources. There's an analysis of the movie Jaws.
Oh, this is great. Yeah. One article makes this really compelling argument challenging the conventional wisdom about the film.
Go on.
It argues that the true hero of the film isn't the grizzled shark hunter, Robert Shaw's character.
All right, or the scientist Cooper.
Or the brainy oceanographer Hooper, exactly. But Sheriff Brody, the police chief, Roy Scheider.
Brody. Okay, why?
Well, their reasoning, the source argues, is that Brody is the only one who consistently prioritizes the safety of the community over everything else, over ego, over profit, over scientific curiosity. He's the voice of caution. Right from the beginning, he pushes back against the mayor. And crucially, the article points out, it's his actions adapting on the fly, not the specialist's grand plans that ultimately kill the shark.
Blowing up with the tank, yeah.
Exactly. He's the everyman who rises to the occasion through kind of civic duty and perseverance.
That actually makes a lot of sense. It makes you watch the movie differently.
It really does. It's about recognizing heroism in maybe unexpected places.
Absolutely. So, okay, we've navigated a huge range of topics today in this deep dive, pulled out key threads from the global economy, geopolitical tensions.
Groundbreaking tech.
Shifts in culture and society.
We've aimed to give you those essential insights, those surprising details that hopefully make you feel truly well-informed on these diverse fronts without getting overwhelmed, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. So, to leave you with a final thought to chew on, we've seen several examples today of nations, groups kind of looking inward, haven't we? Prioritizing things like national manufacturing, think the car tariffs discussion, defense spending, Europe's boom, border security, the National Guard use, even defining identity, like with a woke right.
Right, a focus on the national or the internal.
But at the very same time, we are just undeniably interconnected. Through global supply chains, fast fashion, car production, shared technological infrastructure, those AI data centers, and international conflicts, Ukraine, Taiwan, the instability in Latin America.
Yeah, you can't escape the global aspect.
Exactly. So this raises a fundamental question, doesn't it? How do societies effectively pursue national interests and security, or even find their internal identity in a world where trade, technology, global challenges just make everything so deeply intertwined?
Can you truly isolate yourself in a world that's this connected? It's a huge tension.
It's a constant push and pull, isn't it? Keep exploring, keep noticing how these competing forces play out in the news and the world around you.